our CD, so you can visit us back at our CD table later. And now, thank you so much.
Just have one more hand for Kate. So glad you guys are back with us again.
Oh, it's so.
It's been a long time.
Palm Sunday 2014 is the
That's been hard. Wow. Too long, right?
Yeah.
Coming back. Yeah, all right, very good. Well, welcome once again to Unity Church of Carlsbad. It's my privilege and honor to introduce our guest speaker, who happens to be one of our own. And she's been in our congregation for almost a year. She was ordained at through Unity Institute at Unity Village. In 2013, she served as minister in Unity of Davis, Unity of Orville, and served at Silent Unity as well. But the thing you may not know about her is she's a local girl. She grew up right here in Carlsbad, graduated Carlsbad High School. Graduated Mariposa College, graduated San Diego State, and we're happy to have her back to speak with us today. Please join me in welcoming Reverend Robyn Plante.
Welcome. Thank you. Oh, good to be back here. Yeah. Walking through these doors this morning, I was touched by the legacy that's here. And it's a legacy of love. It's a vibration of love that is felt walking in these doors. And it's so nice to meet Reverend Tony this morning. That was part of building that foundation. And how many of you were here when Reverend Tony was serving? Wow, a lot of you. So you have.
Yeah, we're still around.
That's a beautiful legacy. And so I thought we'd turn to the Unity of Carlsbad's theme for the year and say this together. What is the theme for the year? Together? The art of abundance, a year for courage, creativity, and commitment. That sounds really strong. Yeah. Who's feeling abundant today? All right. All the hands, yes. Well, we begin today with the story. 3 ministers were out on a boat fishing, finally getting away for a little relaxation. And after a while, one of them said, you know, since we're away from everyone, no one's around, why don't we confess our most horrible habit? I bet we'll feel better, you know, confessing this thing that we know that God would not approve of. So they agreed. And the first one said, well, I confess that I have a gambling addiction. I sneak out and go to the casino every night. And the second one said, well, I confess that I cheat on my taxes every year. And they turned to the third one, who was just sitting there watching, until an odd grin appeared on his face. And he said, well, I confess that my most horrible, awful habit is gossiping. And I can't wait to get back. Well, spiritual growth, it's not a straight line, is it? You know, we grow, we stumble, we reassess, we get back up, we grow again. I've been watching my baby grandson learn how to walk. He's 10 months. And for the past 2 months, he's been at it all his waking hours. Does anyone else have a little grandchild you watch this with? So all the day, he was pulling himself up, plunk, pulling himself up on the couch, plunk. And then one day, he pulled himself up and he took a little sideways step. plunk. And then up 2 steps, plunk. And then pulled himself up 1 hand, walked forward a couple steps. And then suddenly he's in the middle of the room standing up and taking a couple of steps before he plunks back down. And his steps are shaky, but he does it anyway. He knows where he wants to go. So that's not him, but it could be. So I've been watching him build his relationship with the principle of gravity over and over and over again. You know, he's strengthening his muscles. He's learning to balance his coordination so he can crawl less and walk more. So watching him, I thought, isn't that a good metaphor for our spiritual journey, you know? Because change invites us every time to renegotiate our relationship with spiritual principle. Even when we've gotten really good at practicing unity principles, of communing more and more with that one presence and one power, with looking more and seeing more the Christ in every person, with minding our thoughts, knowing the power they have to create and doing good in the world. And even if we've been in unity for years, when change comes along, we may find ourselves plunk right back into old habits or negative ways of thinking. So the important thing is, when that happens, is how do we talk to ourselves? Do we judge ourselves harshly, or are we kind and compassionate to ourselves? Because we know we can always pull ourselves back up with prayer, to get support, regain our balance with meditation, and rebuild our confidence and competence with spiritual community. Community is so important for that support. So change pushes us out of our comfort zone and into new territory, and we learn to walk our faith all over again. Every time we experience change, we renew our relationship with God, don't we? Because we're navigating new terrain. So we have a lot of change going on in this community. And how many of you have more than one change going on in your life? Okay, look around. Yeah. A lot is moving and happening, right? And we can see these as, oh no, or we could see these as goes, another spiritual growth opportunity. So I've been doing a lot of work with conscious aging, which has to do with changes in the body. So we have changes going on in the body and in our lives, and we question, who am I now that this is happening? Changes in our circumstance, changes in the world. How do I show up in love now that this is happening? Where is God in this? So we're always renewing our relationship with God. Change asks us to grow and be more reflective and flexible, open to new ways of seeing and being, which was wonderful with the song we just heard. That was putting on the glasses of seeing in a new way, in such a fun and beautiful way. Our common humanity and how we're all connected, seen with the eyes of the heart. So next week we'll look at trusting the process of change. But today I invite you to consider, what would your life be like if you could have more self-compassion in times of growth and change? Jesus taught the importance of self-compassion. When asked what the greatest commandment was, he gave two. And the first, he said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment." In other words, let that love for God permeate your feeling nature. Let it guide your soul into loving action. Let your mind be a broadcast of loving thoughts for the Lord your God within you and around you, beyond you. Metaphysically, we know that Lord means the I am, our spiritual identity, our spiritual essence. So to feel that. And the second part, Jesus said, the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So who's your neighbor? Everyone, yeah. And how do we do that? Because if we're critical of ourselves, how can we be fully accepting of others? If we're unkind or neglectful to ourselves, how can we extend kindness and caring to others in meaningful ways? So some more words for love are acceptance, kindness, caring, and compassion. Jesus understood that it's crucial for us to have self-compassion in order to have compassion for others. So it's not just about loving ourselves, but taking that fullness and extending it to others, that fullness of love. That's how we create heaven on earth, right? And I love this from the Gospel of Thomas that Jesus said, "Love your brother like your soul. Guard him like the pupil of your eye." Compassion, defined as feeling moved by another's suffering and having the desire to alleviate their suffering. So self-compassion is recognizing ways we cause our own suffering and taking steps to free ourselves from our own suffering. Can you recognize ways that you cause your own suffering? Yeah. For me, I've noticed it's been taking things personally or making assumptions. And you know, some of us get our best exercise jumping to conclusions. Can relate to that one, yeah. So the biggest culprit, though, of our internal suffering is the inner critic. It can say mean things. Messages, limiting messages. It can be like a bully in the brain, just picking away at messages of not enough or lack, especially in times of change when we're in new territory and we may be figuring things out. Where we felt competent before because we had learned and practiced, when change comes, we're learning on the spot. So instead of listening and believing the critic, we know that the truth is that we were born with sacred worth, holy, whole, and complete. You were born with sacred worth, holy, whole, and complete. At every age and at every stage. this from the Fetzer Institute on Compassion, Self-Compassion. If we eavesdropped on the continuous thread of others' minds, I imagine we'd be surprised at how cruel we are to ourselves. If self-criticism were a disease, it would most likely dwarf other epidemics. So let's talk about ways we can cultivate more self-compassion. The research on self-compassion points us to the practice of mindfulness and suggests a few things that we can do. So since we recognize that our own suffering comes from a self-critical mind, the first thing we can do is to begin to recognize the types of things that trigger the self-critic. Recognizing times when we're hard on ourselves, or we make a mistake, or we didn't do it perfectly. You know, how do we talk to ourselves? To start noticing without judgment. The self-critic can bring up old stuff and take us on a tour of the past suffering, too. Comparisons or having unrealistic expectations can also trigger the self-critic. Or resisting changes in our lives. And the shoulds, you know. I used to be able to do that. I should be able to do that now. I should. You feel the heaviness of that should on the shoulders. Yeah. So the first step in building self-compassion is recognizing these triggers and that make us suffer. And to be an observer without judgment. The second thing we can do is to respond to our own suffering with kindness. I like this from Theodore Isaac Rubin in his book, Love Me, Love My Fool. I must learn to love the fool in me, the one who feels too much, talks too much, takes too many chances, loves and hates, hurts and gets hurt, promises and breaks promises, laughs and cries. In other words, embrace the human, express the spirit, and welcome your wholeness, the wholeness of who you are. Kristen Neff, compassion researcher, advises another way we can practice self-kindness. With quiet words of comfort and appreciation for yourself. She calls it soft vocalizations, as well as a warm touch on your own arm or on your heart. She said it triggers our evolutionary caregiving response that sends a message to the brain that it's okay to relax. That attention to the body sends a message to the brain that it's okay to relax. Compassionate action toward self and others boosts our immune system. It reduces stress. It increases longevity. Keeps us connected to the pulse of life, to God. Simple statements such as, when we're on a learning curve, we make a mistake, is, you know what, you'll learn from this, it's okay. Or, oops, here I grow again. We said that a lot in ministerial school. Going in there thinking we knew everything, and oh boy, it was a steep learning curve to let go of what we know for a greater understanding of what Spirit wants us to know. So those soft words of comfort to yourself with that warm touch build self-compassion. And even just, you're doing great, you know? And say your name too. You're doing great, Robin. So let's try this, only you say your name, and we'll do it 3 times. Hand on your arm, hand on your heart. You're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. Let's breathe that in for a minute. Another way to do this is with affirmations, to remind ourselves of our spiritual identity. So again, with a hand on your heart or on your arm, I'll say it once, a line once, and then I'll ask you to repeat it with me. And you may wish to close your eyes if you choose. God is love. I am loving. Together. God is love. I am loving. God is wisdom. I am wise. God is wisdom. I am wise. God is strength. I am strong. God is strength. I am strong. God is peace. I am peaceful. God is peace. I am peaceful. God is wholeness. I am whole. God is wholeness. I am whole. God is kindness. I am kind. God is kindness. I am kind. God is love. I am loving. God is love. I am loving. Let me just breathe that in. These are simple things you can do when you see that self-critic popping up. The third thing we can do to build self-compassion is to understand that you do not suffer alone. And sometimes when we're going through a rough patch, it can seem like we're the only ones going through that. But in reality, every soul on this planet is dealing with some sort of challenge in this human experience. And everyone experiences change, wanted or unwanted. Everyone's learning how to navigate some new territory in their lives. And so we learn self-compassion. So the times we do plunk, we can get back up sooner. We spend less time crawling around in negative habits, or old habits, or ways of thinking. We know self-compassion helps pull us up into remembering the truth of who we are. So we take this self-compassion out into the world. There are many things in the world right now that are happening that draw our heart. We want to help. And when that need seems overwhelming, we can always pray and be guided into compassionate action. Just as any problem has many factors that go into it, the solution also has many approaches. And when the need of the world seems overwhelming, I'd like to turn to the practice from the Jewish tradition called Tikkun Olam, which refers to repairing the soul of the world. And in this practice, we mend what needs mending within us and near us. a forgiveness, a restoration, a harmonization, a healing. We do the inner mending and mending close to us. And in this way, the world's soul is cared for and mended. I like to picture a giant quilt, and everyone in the world and the family of humanity has a place on this quilt. And if we all do our inner mending and local mending, the world's soul is cared for. So who in your life, someone near you, is calling for your kindness, care, and compassion? I invite you to sit with that this week and let your compassionate heart be guided. Love your neighbor as yourself. And just as the baby knows how to rise, just as you, when you were a baby, knew how to rise, how to stand, and how to walk, the Christ in you knows how to rise in love, stand in truth, and walk in courage and compassion.